Welcome back to Dunkley, but the finishing dessert here is going to be better than any red tulip after dinner mint, because this is the main game in many ways. None other than the man who's just been gritting his teeth the whole time, but Labor decided not to send anyone. Stephen Conroy, ladies and gentlemen. The Persian princess, the queen of the outsiders, 11 o'clock every night. Rita Panahi, you can see him on Friday night, but he's in for Andrew Bolt all week, the great Steve Price. And a reminder that on Saturday night, Steve's going to be part of the coverage, of course, sitting there in this booth and that booth and this early return. And I'm hearing all of this stuff. It's all fun to watch, and it's from 6 o'clock on Saturday night. All right, Stephen, why wasn't Labor here?
Look, Jodie has been actually on the phone banks tonight, actually calling voters, talking to them direct, selling the message and chasing their votes.
Rita, should she have been here tonight?
That is the weakest excuse I have ever heard. So she doesn't want to be here to speak to a room full of locals, to a massive audience. She'd rather be calling individuals who don't want to be bothered at home.
She's chasing every vote.
So she's basically a telemarketer. Is that what you want us to elect a telemarketer?
That's what candidates do. They pick up the phone, they call people in the homes and they have a chat with them.
All right.
As someone who doesn't like getting unsolicited calls, no thank you. That's a good reason not to vote for her right there. Plus the fact that she called 56% of the electorate, she essentially labelled them as racist. She said they're suffering from the worst type of white privilege. It is just such a horrendous comment to make, and she needs to be here to explain it. She hasn't explained those comments or apologised.
Okay. So, Steve, I apologise for ever interrupting you, darling. You know that. Now, Steve, obviously, in terms of issues, we know cost of living is as big as it is. Albo thinks that the tax cuts is the beginning of a conversation of we get it. The reality is it doesn't kick in until July the 1st. However, the reason we're having the by-election is because of a popular local MP who passed away. Does that change what the result ends up being about whether it is about today's circumstances or the reason there's a by-election at all?
We all feel very sorry for the local candidate who passed away. We all say that, and that's just a fact. But the people in this room tonight and the people who live in Dunkley are the best example I think you could get of aspirational middle-class Australians who want the best for their families. That's who they are. And I know this area pretty well. I've been reporting for 50 years. I've done a whole lot of stuff in Frankston. Frankston's on the move. It's a place where people are going to want to come and live. And I just think that Labor, in particular Anthony Albanese, has misread this community completely. I mean, these people are having to pay a lot of money to fill their car up with petrol because a lot of them have to drive great distances to go to work. This is tradie heaven here. The tradies live in Dunkley. I mean, I see them on the road every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning. They're going off to work hard. They're not rich, they're not wealthy. They're just people who want a better life for themselves. I think a lot of people are going to be very surprised at what happens in here on Saturday.
I've got to say, Stephen, my sense of it, right, and obviously while I have ample guts, which help me come up with things, my sense is that this is closer than the 52-48 that we saw a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure if it's 51-49 right now because of sample size, and we'll bore everyone with that. But is a win here, or it's the size of the win that matters? Like, how are we supposed to read what happens? And I mean, obviously, as a Labor man, you want a win by one vote. Who cares? But what looks like a win in this place for either side?
Yeah, look, I think Peter Dutton's seen in the last couple of weeks the polls moving to him. The primary vote for the Libs in every single national poll is now well ahead of Labor, and that will give Peter Dutton a lot of heart for this contest. The poll, I agree entirely with what you're saying. It's a bit of a small poll to try and make a call, but I think it's narrow in that category, 52-48, with Labor at the moment probably thinking it's marginally on the right side of the line. They would take that as a win. I mean, Peter had a really strong personal following. She proved that when she won the seat. It was a Liberal seat. It's never been easy to win this seat. Dunkley's one we've chased for years and years and years. And Peter was a fantastic candidate. It's a tragedy where it is. So I think that takes, that personal vote of Peter's is hard to transfer.
People in this room don't give a rat's about polls. They just want to be looked after by a government that cares about them. and I think they feel like they're being ignored completely.
I think to agree
They don't
with
care
you,
about polls.
to agree with you and disagree with you at the same time, Steve. Frankly, I don't think the people in this electorate are fooled by a government of 9 years that did nothing. It supported the tax cuts. It's not putting forward a petrol tax cut. It's not putting forward any solution to any of their problems. It's just saying protest. OK, and that's fair enough. I'm not being critical of that. But it has no solid policies. It is put on the table to say, you're all going to be better off.
But sadly, the people in this room also had to put up with Dan Andrews for the last year.
I know Steve well enough. I know Steve well enough that when he was driving here, he said, what's the one thing that'll automatically get the room on side? He's just gone, I'm going to bang this big one. Anyway, well played. Rita, again.
Should we ask Steve, who's a very keen golfer, what are the chances of Dan getting membership at any Peninsula golf course?
None and zero. You're not at my club.
So Rita, again, you've live in this part of the world, you understand Melbourne politics. Not this exactly Frankston, but you know what I'm saying. But also, you were out and about today talking to a whole bunch of people. The reality of politics is that as hardcore as we all are, and we all know how many grains of sand there are on the beach, it's compulsory voting, which is why FM radio appearances are also damn important. But also, it goes back to where I started the show. More than half of the country was telling a left-wing pollster just a couple of weeks ago, no idea about the tax cuts. So if the government's expecting that to be the circuit breaker, guess what? No one knows there's a circuit breaker.
No, and this room is very politically engaged. They know the issues, they know what they think. That's not the experience out there. And if you go out there and talk to people, so many of them barely know there's a by-election. They don't really know who they're backing, what their different candidate stances are. So there is a great deal of apathy out there. So you've got to factor that in. And when you've got a room like this who are a knowledgeable audience, that's not the experience out there. And that was certainly when I was talking to people today around Frankston Central and the train station. It was, yeah, it was. I actually took some.
Very polite.
Yeah,
well, you'll see.
What, about Frankston train station? Or, yeah.
You'll see.
She didn't come here on the train, all right? We all know the Persian princess was carried here in a chariot of her own, and I was one of
the train wasn't even running today.
Yeah.
Well, I took out some A4 pictures of the Premier of Victoria, the Prime Minister, the Opposition Leader, Federal Treasurer, just to see if people recognise these individuals.
Anyone recognise Jacinta?
Barely anybody, and she's the Premier of the state. So that just shows you that people who are not politically engaged, they just don't give a stuff. Perhaps they vote a certain way because their parents did, or what they remember from school. But you can't discount that. And I think you touched on the fact that the local member here passed away. There was a sentiment again from people who said, you know, Labor have already won this seat at the last election. They deserve to hold it until the next. Now, that may not be a popular view, but it's an opinion that's prevalent out there, and it certainly will have some sort of a factor.
Yeah, I mean, again, why you have a by-election is always a bit indicative as to what might be the result. All right, we're inside our final minute here, and we are eating into the late debates time, so they can take it off me at another point in time. But, Stephen, what of the attacks that are out there do you think is the most potent?
I think the Advance Australia ad is a strong ad. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's a fair representation of what's happened. This was legislation that was passed by Peter Dutton and the former Liberal government that the High Court knocked over. That's what caused those people to be in the community. Sorry, that's just actually a fact. Yeah, no, well, if you wanted to give them some money to go with keeping them in jail when you let them out, good call, because you'd been paying them compensation for holding them after the legislation that was holding them was knocked over in the High Court. But if you want to give them, $100,000 to add to the insult, to the injury, you go for it.
All right.
$100,000 check.
Oh, it's like state conference all over again. Thank you very much, guys.